tell me I'm doing something horribly wrong, but we'll discuss it later and try to present option.
Can I ask a question? Can you give me an example of how you calculate this? One versus another, kind of just a simple idea.
Sure, if I can approach.
Yes, please. For my purposes at least.
I'll do that.
Dummy it down for me.
I'll dumb down. Okay. So you have a building. So the front facade is generally considered this times this. Equaling, X number of square feet, and then you take 10% of that, equaling the square footage of the sign. Okay. The new measurement would simply be this. You get 1 square foot per linear running width of the building. And the problem, of course, is this the facade, or is this the facade? And most people don't have a ladder that goes 40 feet in the air. So they have a hard time measuring it. Would anyone else like my wonderful demonstration?
Definitely.
Okay.
We know my mind now.
So you got a storefront. The front facade would normally be this times this times 10% equals square footage. The new would be just the frontage. And then you get 1 square foot per foot of frontage. And the problem usually is this the front of the facade, or is this the facade? And people don't have the ability to measure height. They have the ability to measure width and height. So that's why it makes it simpler. So you've got it.
So in other words, it's a new method, it's just length times, or width times width.
It's just the width, and then you get 1 square foot of signage per width of the store. So if your store is 40 feet wide, you can have a 40 square foot sign.
Also, your signs don't come in odd sizes. They're square sizes. So if you had a 39, you're eligible to have a 39 square foot sign, which corner do you cut out? Side or the top? Makes sense to me.
So I think if nothing else, Mr. Johnson and I will discuss this and we'll bring back another topic next month.
Can I just add one more thing for you to think about?
Oh, yes.
And that is, again, if you're looking for to allow businesses to be a little more creative with their signage, you might want to consider allowing more than 1 sign per wall. You have, right now you're limited to one per business, but again, allowing some creativity on the part of businesses. If you limit the maximum square footage, let's say it's 50 square feet, and you can also limit the number of signs, let's say no more than 4, but at least you've given the owner and the sign maker some ability to be creative in expressing their message rather than limit it to 1. City of Greenville allows that, and I can bring to you what other communities use and have used successfully. So that may be something that you wish to think about when you consider changing this.
Yes.
Can you bring those pictures so we can see the difference?
Can you say that again, please?
Can you bring those pictures so we can see the difference between the couple and the time and the month of time?
I can drive to Greenville.
Yeah.
I have to drive to Greenville. Yes, that's right.
I want to think that Carmine showed us some examples of that when we were looking at different towns one time, and that's when we discussed the option of having, instead of only having, it used to be you could only have 1 vertical sign and 1 protruding sign. Now it was supposed to be made so you could have 1 or you could have 1 of each.
And if you think about those businesses out by the highway, they would love to have 1 on the front for them and then 1 on the highway. That gives them 2 too. So I think that was one of the other things he mentioned too.
The ordinances currently allow you to have 1 sign per public street frontage.
Well, the back of that wouldn't be a public street frontage, but it's a freeway, so.
Well, we've been counting the 131 as public street frontage.
Okay.
Sign ordinance, so variances for the businesses has always been a
We just, yeah,
can of worms for us.
it
So
hasn't been that long since we've done.
whatever we can do to simplify it on our end is.
One more question.
Yes.
So is this verbiage that you're proposing something that you've had in other districts? Other cities?
I've seen it being used in other municipalities. My primary purpose for presenting it is the simplicity of it, because people, individual business owners, they don't have a 40-foot ladder to get to the top of the building. They don't know how tall it is. There's, at the Lake Creek Plaza, there's the vertical frontage, and then there is a 4 or 6 foot, backward facing roof. Does that get counted? Does is it just the vertical part that's counted, or do you count the running length? There's a lot of considerations that go into what a facade is, and is not spelled out in the ordinances. So I present to make it simpler, and that was my primary purpose.
All right. Mr. Johnson, you want to walk us through? You've got a couple of going through the zoning ordinance amendments, items that you've put together for us.
Sure.
Well, I've been working city manager and the mayor for about a month now, and developing some things that could be changed. And one of the ones that rose to the top was the mixed-use zoning district requirements. Your master plan calls for changes to be made to that district, or at least changing the size of it. But in looking at a recent request we received to use one of the existing buildings for contractor use, we had to tell that, sorry, you can't use that building as a paint contracting. It's not allowed in the mixed-use district. But in looking at the buildings that exist there, many of them are older industrial-type buildings that a contractor would fit in fine and would fit into that neighborhood. So with that as kind of our basis of proceeding, we came up with a list of different land uses that we'd like you to consider to add to the zoning ordinance for the mixed-use zone. And the city manager has put together the ordinance in ordinance format, and attached to that would be the list that I came up with in terms of uses to add. And you have that in front of you. Maybe in terms of to your time, I would at least ask at this point if you have any questions about that list of uses, or I'd be glad to go through it.
One of the businesses that's in there right now is repair for motorcycles and everything, and basically he's non-conforming.
That's right. That's why we put it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole district used to be allowed in there, and then they moved that boundary to mixed use, remember, about 5 years.
Right. And the mixed-use zone, I think, has been in place for 8 or 9 years, maybe more, 12 years, 2005. And with the hope of, that plan didn't come to fruition, that different uses would move into those buildings and re-energize it, and it just hasn't happened. So what we're trying to do is take a realistic look at what is the practical uses that could go into those buildings, and then and put them into the ordinance to attract businesses that can move in and start employing people and maybe actually fix up the. So we've provided a number of uses. Contractors is one, machine shops, tool and die, some indoor recreation establishments. You'll find that in other industrial buildings where people put in CrossFit uses or aerobics or something where they might have some high ceilings. Those fit well into older industrial buildings. We wanted to make sure we added something for the conversion of existing houses that are in the mixed-use zone. Some of those houses are on the fringe, but because they back up to industrial, someone may say, well, I'd like to convert that to an office or an insurance agency or something like that. So we've added that as a permitted use subject to site plan review. So because right now it's not, you don't have as much control over it. So we wanted to give that opportunity to use some existing houses that are mostly on the fringe of the mixed-use zone. We added the term incubator facilities, and we provided a definition. Basically, if someone took one of those larger industrial buildings and wanted to carve it up into smaller suites, and you maybe have been in some of these older factories, you just have a cloth partition between uses, and you rent 200 square feet out for $100 a month to allow somebody to get in there and start a bicycle repair shop or something like that. So we allowed different uses in the same building and provided a definition for incubators. So we're kind of moving in the direction of saying, what can we do to encourage businesses to take these buildings and use them, and the current ordinance is kind of an impediment to that. So we're broadening the uses and trying to come up with uses that would naturally fit into those kinds of buildings in that zoning district.
It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the current mixed-use zone that we have doesn't necessarily fully promote flexibility of use, because it's written in a way that's too restrictive.
It is now, yes. Over the course of time, it is going to be more restrictive than originally thought. I mean, at the time, it was thought to be a good idea, and we could correct that. We could correct the ill with zoning language. It hasn't worked out. Now we're trying to come back with different zoning ordinance language that we think at this point in time will work. And time will tell.
That was the irony for me, is that it seems we're labeling this as a mixed-use zone, yet in reality, there's very few things that are fitting inside.
Yes.
Yeah, anything that encourages more businesses to use some of our empty buildings and keep businesses here is fantastic, so I'll always support that.
We also, I noticed here, it's a special use for machine shops and tool and die, and there's already one tool and die machine shop there that's non-compliant in that area.
Correct. Yeah, well, again, this is a draft. If you want to take some of the uses that are identified as special land uses and move them over into the permitted column, yeah, this would be the time to do that.
I should say, I put all of the industrial uses as special land uses to give this body more control over, what industrial use might go next to a house. But Mr. Johnson is correct. If you guys wanted to change any of those to permitted, you are entitled to do so.
There's no mention, basically for the establishment of producing alcohol, a bit like Miller Brewery. You see that special land use versus permitted?
Yeah. Incubator.
Yep, the reason I put that as special land use is because alcohol's evolved. I didn't want to be put into a situation where we had drunk people wandering across other people's front yards.
I don't like to scratch my front yard.
Again, I just want to give this body more control over what might go in that district while still permitted.
Now, that's just retail sales. Now, this has, it identifies as retail sales. If, for whatever reason, the brewery downtown buys one of them buildings and uses it as its brewery, not selling, how would that fall into?
In that scenario again, do you mean if they actually establish the brewery there?
Let's say he needs more room to brew his product, make more beer. So he buys an empty building and puts his distilleries or whatever, the fermenters in there. He doesn't sell it out of there, but it's a manufacturer.
Yeah, that'd be special land use.
Okay.
And then the other items there, A, B, and C, would be something that the planning commission could, as part of the special use, weigh in on and say, are you going to do this? How much is devoted to it? Show us a site plan. So you have control over those different uses that are typically associated with the brewing process. You've seen that. Of course, I've never been to a brewery, but I understand that they do have those kinds of things at breweries.
I know the place up in Traverse City, they bought a big pole barn out in the country, and that's all they're using it for their main just sale, the bar, for whatever you want to call it, in Traverse City.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not selling anything there, and the public is not invited in. It's a private business.
Right.
But yet their product is shipped out of there to different breweries.
Yeah.
Or bars.
Yeah, well, this would allow that to happen
Uh-huh.
in that zoning district, so. So as I understand it, in terms of the procedure, this would go from this body to the council for their review next, and then back here for a public hearing.
Yep, the process would be this body to make a recommendation to the city council, and then we would hold a public hearing at the next planning commission meeting, and then the city council would pass an ordinance on second reading.
Any other questions anybody has?
So are you comfortable with recommending this to proceed on? Do you need a vote on that?
You could recommend today, or you could recommend after the public hearing, whichever way you want to do it.
What's your pleasure?
Well, how can I have a public hearing anyway? Or just wait for the public hearing in case the public tells us something we ain't thinking of.